Hey, it's Chris Maniak. I'm over here at the CX. Wanted to go over wire weld fixtures for Fabric reInvent. Um, Basically, the basic wire weld sections, they do come in a few different sizes, and I'll go over that here in a moment. But they all basically get put together the same. So I wanted to go over some expectations. Most of our contractors are very well versed in wire weld, so not everything in this video is going to be super exciting to you. But there are some call outs of what we're going to be expecting in the test. So would appreciate if you continue to watch. But first things first, let's talk about the sizes. So what we're looking at here is the 108-inch wire weld section. And then over here we have a 90. So those are the two different sizes you're going to see. The 90 is going to appear on plan. It's just going to say 90. If you look on plan, this block actually says 108, and then it says overstock, and that's exactly why it's taller, so we can get some overstock into the top. And you'll see there's actually a marketing component that fills that gap, and that will actually be in a different video. But anyhow, one thing to know is that the gable, which is what wire weld calls what I usually say an upright, the gable on the 108 and the 90, there's actually the base gable is actually a 90 on both. So obviously that's the only thing you have there is a 90-inch gable. Here you have a 90-inch gable, and then you have an extension upright. So this guy literally has a splicer welded onto it, and it literally slides on to extend it up to 108. So first thing to know there is that you're going to end up having to extend this after you get it standing. So that's the big difference between the two. Now I'm looking at 4-foot sections. These are deeper than our normal wire weld sections that are normally 24, so these are 30 deep. I may be able to walk around here in a second and show you before the video ends. I think it's still built, but there's also some 30-inch wide sections. Goes together the same way, but sometimes we actually on the back side of a run will have two 30-inch wire weld end caps. So like I said, it goes together the same, just the width of the sections is slightly different. So let's talk real quick about, or as quick as possible, about how one of these actually goes together. Takes two installers to get this thing started and stood. Very simple. Some guys do it slightly different than other. I'm going to go through how I do it. But there are some variances in how you can get this done. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take two gable uprights, say you have nothing here, and you're literally going to have one person stand in the middle of these two gables, and they're going to hold them upright. They're going to try to hold those a little further than 4-foot spacing, and then someone's going to come through and they're going to take these components, not the shelf, but the spanner itself, and then they're going to go ahead and connect them in. You can see that they're made so if you put one adjacent to the other, they're offset. And then this is a BBRB KP, which is kick plate. Those always go on the front. It gives it that nice look. The one on the back is actually slightly different. Let me see if I can lift this up so you can see. But that spanner there in the back, it's essentially the same component. It's a BBRB, not with a KP on the end, but it basically doesn't have that deep front to give that nice toe kick look, but does the same thing, and then it supports the melamine shelf. So anyways, I'm going to set this back down, even though at this point you wouldn't have this installed. So one person's holding the gables, someone will put the two spanners in the bottom, and then what you're going to do is you're going to come up to the top of this upright, and then you need spacing. So I always just put a shelf in because it's going to have to go there anyways. If you really wanted to, you could use one of the other components like an RB, the rebar, if you wanted to just get the spacing to get it stood up. But I suggest that you go ahead and put the shelf in. So one thing about these Fabric reInvent fixtures, and this could be a mistake that someone's going to make, is you'll see up top there, that is what our vendor calls a flat top shelf. So that shelf is completely all welded together. It's one piece. It's ready to just set up there. Now for the Fabric reInvent test, we have actually created shelves that are multiple components to save our stores from having to tilt the shelves in. If you're familiar with wire weld, you'll know what I'm talking about. So the thing that is a little bit confusing is we could have used a flat top shelf here, but the way that this was actually ordered, we actually have a wire mesh grid shelf sitting on these RBs for this shelf. And this shelf right here, which will basically be the base of what you could see, I threw a piece of fabric up there, our overstock. This is installed by the Fixture installer. So once you have this 4-foot spacing identified by getting it installed, now you get to the part where you're going to put the anti-sway braces. So at this point, this thing's not really stable. It will probably stand up, but if someone bumped into it, it would just fall over. Not until you get this anti-sway brace installed will it then be safe to walk away from. So when you put the anti-sway brace in, what you're going to do is you want to make sure that it's centered. So you have a 90-inch upright. You're going to want to find the right spacing in order for this X to be in the center of that 90-inch upright. And then you'll see the anti-sway brace itself has turnbuckles, so you can tighten them. So what you're going to want to do is, once you get those installed and you have them loosely connected, you're going to take a level, and whoever's holding the uprights, just hold a nice, I would say at least a 2-foot long level. You can use a longer one, but I wouldn't go too short because sometimes these gables kind of get a banana in them. So you're going to want to stretch across this with your level. And one person's going to hold the level and hold it as straight as they can while the other person adjusts the right side and the left side of this turnbuckle until it starts to get tight. Once you get about tight, that's really where you're going to want to watch, making sure that your gable is level. And then you may have to loosen one, tighten one, back and forth until you get it perfectly level. So once you're at that point, then we're pretty much rolling, and there's only a few more steps that you have to do. So after you get the 90-inch uprights up, leveled, you got the section up, then you can go ahead and put the extension upright on there. So you'll slide that one down, you'll go to the other side, you'll put the other extension on. This shelf, you've already done in a previous step. And then on top, you will put a flat top shelf. And then in the back, which you can't see here, let me rotate around. These extension upright sections actually have, I don't know if you can see through there, they actually have an anti-sway brace up there. Let me get a ladder so you can see a little better. There's your anti-sway brace for the top extension gables. So you'll go ahead and get those installed. Mind you, for the fabric reinvent test, we will be putting anti-sway braces in every inline section. We'll talk a little about perimeter wall sections here in a little bit, what the expectation is there. And then kind of last steps before you would walk away from a section is these extension uprights. You could see right here, it looks like there's a hole that is really meant to have a screw in it. We're not at the point where we have charcoal screws created to go ahead and fasten that in. So the temporary direction is, and you only have to do this in the front. We're going to be asking you to supply black zip ties. I think what I had grabbed, and I had them sitting here, was 6-inch. That will be confirmed in the bid. I don't know what I did with them. Here they are. But I just have some black zip ties. You can get those at Home Depot. And you're just going to do the front. You don't need to do the back. We're not afraid of anyone bumping it off. But if this wasn't to be zip tied and I lifted up on this extension upright, you could get it to pop off. And then we put another one on the opposite side, just on the fronts. And then last step was to get this melamine board dropped into place. At this point, if you're in a rollout store, the store team will be setting all of the actual shelves that go in the sections. There's 12 different profiles. We are asking that you guys help out because you're a little more familiar with wire weld of how to get them set. These are new details, new profiles that you've never seen before. However, we have made some instructional videos for them, so they might not need your help too much. Last but not least, I don't know if anyone is familiar with this particular component. Let me get a ladder just so I can get up and explain something that I do not have here, but a lot of you will be familiar with this. Weld makes a component. It's called a B2B, a back-to-back clip, but it's basically a component that will splice these two uprights together to hold them straight. The expectation is that the back-to-back clips are installed. We do realize that there's going to be situations, depending on how level the floor is, that it's going to be connected on the top, but you might have a small gap on the bottom. We understand that's going to happen, and that is okay. We will not be using gable brackets like we do in our foam and fiber department now to fasten the bottom together. And I'm trying to think if I missed anything here. Oh, the valance band. So the valance band is called out in the details, the height for it, but you could see it's lining up with this shelf. And the only other thing I can speak to, a couple little pointers for when you're doing this, is that obviously you guys should always be marking floors with the T. I won't go into the details of how I mark the floors because everyone does it a little different. You can see there's a little piece of tape down there. But if it's a polished concrete floor like we have here, you're definitely going to want to snap a line from one side to the other. You don't have to worry about the line. It's never going to be seen again. Because this thing sits so low to the ground, you're not going to see the line after the fact. If it is a VCT store, you really just need the T's at the end. You can measure the gable fronts to a tile line to make sure that it's straight. I would get a section or two ahead of the store before you start letting them merchandise it if you are in a rollout store. And then I did say there was going to be another video, but I will go ahead and show just the backstock section up there. There's this marketing, we were calling it a shop header, but basically showing you the shop that we're in. These are installed by the store team. You will see in a later video that there's a very specific place in the rollout where you guys are installing a few of these on perimeter wall sections. And I apologize if I embarrass myself. I think there may be some 30-inch sections built up here, and I am actually incorrect. There was some 30-inch sections up here, but nothing really different to show you on that. Just the same exact parts, just a slimmer, not as wide section. So the next part, I just wanted to talk about perimeter wall sections, which will typically be 108 inches tall if it's on the perimeter. I don't have any of these set up on the wall, so you're going to have to use your imagination a little. But when these are on the perimeter walls, like we have always done, there will be two sets of 2x4s on the wall for furring, and you'll be fastening Corex to the wall. So the one thing that's important is we don't have 108-inch Corex. So when you set your Corex on for the wall, what's important to us is that the Corex goes from the bottom, and then it's going to fall short of going to the top. We don't care because this is going to be completely covered with that apparel sign. So we do understand that the Corex isn't going all the way up to the top of the fixture. Another thing is the anti-sway braces. So when you are fastening these to the furring with a gable bracket, the anti-sway brace is completely pointless. You're obviously going to be making sure that these are level before you fasten them to the furring. So really, we have ordered gable or anti-sway braces for the 2021 rollout. So you can go ahead and throw them in there. But just wanted to make a call out for future. We will not be ordering anti-sway braces for perimeter wall sections. As I said, not to be redundant, they're not needed. So a couple more things about building perimeter wall sections, and this is where people get into preference of how they like to do it. I know a lot of contractors that like to build this one section the same exact way that I just showed you to build it. So they'll literally do all the same steps, put the anti-sway brace up, they'll have it perfectly level, then they'll push it up against the Corex and the furring. I do not like to do it like that. I think it is not the most efficient way. So what I do is I actually take a gable upright. I'll take it and literally fasten it with a gable bracket to the furring and the Corex. I'll put a level on the upright before I fasten it to make sure that it's perfectly straight. And then it's literally just sitting there by itself with no other components. And then I'll go up and I'll put some spanners in, the BBRB and BBRB KP in, and then shelves, and I'll literally just go through and fasten all the uprights and then just the minimal components to get everything stood up and fastened to the wall. And then I'll go through after the fact and fill out all of the other components the same way I had mentioned while doing inline sections. So that is a different method. I don't really care which way you do it as long as it looks good and it's level and it's straight. A few more things. So once again, using your imagination, if you pretended that this was on a wall, not inline, obviously you can see another bay, there's not a wall behind it. It is for the very first gable in a daisy chain, so at the end of a perimeter wall run, you are not going to use a gable bracket, which you can look in the cut sheet folder to see what a gable bracket is, but it's basically just a bracket that completely goes over the upright there, and then you run a screw here and you run a screw on the outside into the furring. So for any of the middle sections or add-ons, that's completely fine, and that's how you'll do it. For the very first upright in a run, we don't want the bracket just floating out into space. So what we ask you to do is to drill a hole in the upright and run a fastener straight through the gable into the 2x4. So that is just one of those Joanne preferences, and would be appreciated if you could do it. One last thing, I promise it is the last thing. Once again, using your imagination, because I don't have this stood here. So just wanted to show just a fixture on furring. So there's my 2x4 on top, there's my 2x4 on bottom. So you can see here in this scenario, the furring is kind of maybe baffled. It's pretty much even with the upright, maybe a 1/16 in. You can see here, it's about even with the upright. In this application with Logier, we'd be putting on a CUE T end trim and it would install just fine. If you're doing wire weld, super important that you remember this so you don't have to tear it back apart later. So what we end up putting in here is a component to fill this gap. It's basically just a piece of wood that's 1.5 inches wide by the height of the wire weld fixture, and it's called a custom fill. In order to successfully install it, what you need to do before you screw your very first gable to the furring is you need to make sure that you mark that 2x4 so you're cutting it so it's 3/4 inch back. So you're not going to want it even with your gable, you're going to want it in a little. That way you're giving yourself room to slip the custom fill in there and have it be flush with the end of the upright. So it's basically recessed into this hole, so it's one straight edge right there. And then you basically just run one screw through the custom fill into the 2x4 there, one screw into the custom fill there. You are going to want to countersink it so the screw is flat, and then we provide some box corner stickers to cover the fasteners. And that is pretty much it for getting a custom fill installed behind wire weld. So I promised that was going to be the last thing. I will just take one walk around the fixture. Like I said, different accessories and shelf profiles. Those are all captured in different videos. And this was more just about building the skeleton or the main frame of the fixture. All right, thanks for watching.